Welcome to Rotary Club of Cincinnati, Thursday, January 23rd. We're blessed to have Senator Rob Portman and Jane Portman here with us. We're going to do a little fireside chat with Al Conscious a little later and a Q&A, so be ready with your questions. Reminder, we have Chef Jose Salazar next Thursday, so make sure you sign up for the event by 5 o'clock tomorrow. As we always do, we're going to kick it off with our national anthem given by Janet Metzelar and Ariel Miller. To recite the four-way test and invocation with our membership today.
Thank you, President Eric. Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see everybody here today. Please join me in prayer. Almighty Father, we are thankful for this day that you have given us, for its blessings, its opportunities, and its challenges. As members of Rotary, we pray that we are ever mindful of opportunities to render our service to others in our community and around the world. We thank our guest today, Senator Rob Portman, for his many years of public service, which made our community and our country a better place. We pray that our incoming legislators and elected officials learn civility and the art of compromise when considering new laws and take into account all those Americans that will be affected when instituting change. We ask these things in your name, Almighty Father. Amen. Amen. And now let us recite the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you.
We have many guests and visiting Rotarians we want to honor today. I'm going to bring up Ben Busby, Sergeant of Officer today, to announce our guests and future Rotarians.
Good afternoon, everyone. We have several guests today, so what we'll do is, as we announce them, we'll have them wave or stand up and have a little wave from our guests. And then we'll hold our applause until after, since we have quite a few names. So, and then one name of a Rotarian that's missing on this list, I've never seen this before, is Michael's not on the list today as a regional guest. I've never seen it. Yeah. So we'll start here with, so we have Angie Dodge, who's a Square Personal Counseling and with Lisa Liquor. We have Daniel Fortune, he's here, of Gina Washington. Okay, over there. Jeff Surgrives of Skilled Care with Lisa Liquor. We have Kevin Gillis with Lisa Liquor as well. Then we have Peter Schletes, hopefully that's right, Global Underwriters, and then Allison Kaufman. Yes, we have Randy Sargraves, G&W Products, and this is Lisa Liquor. Rula Harsh, and she's with First Commonwealth Bank, Esteban. And we have Sam Lickard, obviously, which is Savannah Golick is here, of Jessica Sturts. It's a later, sure. Thank you. Sean McGee with USI, Mark Smith. Thank you. Tom Anderley from William James. Guess with Doug Bolton. Thank you. And then Tracy Burgoon, DAV, Eddie Rowan. In the back, thank you. And then the final one, Tyler Irvin, Blue and Company, Jen Meter. Well, we wanted to welcome all our guests. We can give them a round of applause now.
Thanks, Ben, and thanks to all of you for attending. We'll have a great meeting today. We want you to come back and learn more about Rotary. We have double duty from Angie Ferguson, meeting sponsor. Thank you, Angie, for sponsoring today's meeting, and an update on Pickle Gross.
Okay, happy Thursday, everyone. I wanted to take a minute just to mention something with our esteemed guests today. So the reason why you all got the message from Bob, he sponsored for the meeting, and I immediately wanted to do that because Senator Portman has been instrumental in the field that I work in. I work in drug prevention, and he was a passionate advocate for legislation and funding and action at the grassroots level for addiction prevention, rehabilitation, kind intervention, and for individuals involved with justice. So I just wanted to take a second to say thank you for the work that you've done. I hope you're loving retirement. We miss you. Okay, so Pickle Brawl, you guys, is going to be so much fun. We are finally at the stages where we are now, as of this moment, accepting registrations. If you aren't aware, this is a pickleball tournament that is Mardi Gras themed. It is on March 8th, and there's 2 sections to the evening. It happens at Aces, starting at 4 p.m. The first part of the evening is a tournament, and there's 2 actual tournaments happening at the same time. There's going to be a novice tournament and a skilled tournament. So if you're a newbie and you want to take your first stab at a tournament, you are welcome to join. If you are a skilled player and you want some more competition, you are welcome to join. First place prize is $500 for the team. Second place is $250. So it's nothing to shrug at. And then after the tournament concludes, right before we do the medal round, there will be a pro exhibition. So the pros at Aces are going to do a game where you can really see how it's done. And then we'll do our awards. After that concludes, we have what's called Open All. It's all the courts are open play, open bar, open food. The chef at Aces is passionate about Cajun cuisine. The menu that we have lined up for everyone is fantastic. And this year's theme is beignets done that, because there will be beignets on the buffet. So please take a minute to sign up. I've had a ton of questions from people saying, when can I register, when can I register? I do think that it will go fast because we now have a limit of 6 courts. And so we are allowing team registrations this year. It's $150 for a team. Every team gets a t-shirt for each player, 2 drink tickets, and then of course all the tournaments. We are still accepting donations for the silent auction. So please, if you have something that you would like to donate, you're able to donate. An awesome bottle of bourbon that's probably just on display in your shelf, but it can help us buy some recreation equipment and experiences for children with disabilities. All of this money goes to Rotary Foundation to do some good in our community. So we hope to see you March 8th. Thank you to everyone who's volunteering, and please sign up as soon as possible. Thank you.
So Michael Schatzman is going to introduce a new member, Mark Smith.
Thank you, President Eric. Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, hold on. I got 3 and calling 1 right now. Let's try this again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
There we go, that's better. So today is my pleasure to introduce Mark Smith, the newest member of the Rotary Club of Cincinnati. Mark's story is rooted in a unique blend of cultures and experiences. Born to a Jamaican mother and a father from West Bygone, Virginia, Mark grew up right here in Wyoming, Ohio. And though life took him on a journey across various places, he ultimately found his way back to Cincinnati, this time to build a life with his wife and their 4 daughters. It's from our Department of Redundancy Department. Okay, as a dedicated girl dad, Mark finds his greatest joy and his biggest challenge in raising his family. They are the source of his strength and motivation, constantly inspiring him to grow and give his best to the world. Professionally, Mark has followed a childhood dream into civil engineering. After spending over a decade designing and inspecting Ohio's roads and bridges, he transitioned into risk management, where he supports engineering and construction firms with their commercial insurance needs. So despite his many commitments, Mark finds time to enjoy life's simple pleasure. He's a very passionate Bengals fan. Can I get a who day?
Who day?
Who day?
Who day?
Who day thing?
Beat them Bengals.
Who day? He never misses a game at Paycor Stadium. And he treasures his family vacations and outdoor adventures, and even dabbling in cartography. Cartography, anybody? Thank you. He also loves football, or soccer, as we call it here. Mark lives by a quote that has guided him through his life. Today, you are you. That is truer than true. There's no one alive who is youer than you. Please join me in giving a warm Rotary Club of Cincinnati welcome to my friend, Mark Smith.
Thanks, Michael. Congrats to Mark Smith. All right, so we have one meeting after this meeting of World Affairs Committee in the Highland Room, which is the back corner of the floor. A number of birthdays today. John McCann. We have one who's in the audience, Gary Walton, whose birthday is today. Raise your hand. We have Linda Muth, who's also today, Brad Glazer on the 25th, John Doherty on the 26th, and Tim Marcady on the 27th. Since Gary's here, let's do a little happy birthday well wishes on 3. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Gary! All right, to split the pot. So today's pot we have $48, and then the big pot $256. There are 2 colors, so 50-50 shot of getting the right color. I'm going to ask Senator Portman to pick the ticket. It's not yellow. We have a blue ticket. Thank you. All right, the winning ticket is 20932-172. 20932-172. Blue ticket. Brad Lamar, all right, Brad. And for the Queen of Hearts. Tennis base continues on. So, date to remember. We're going to do something new here. Save the date on February 6th. It's coming up in a few weeks. I've asked all of the club board directors and all the committee chairs to attend a committee training on February 6th at 11 a.m. that I will be hosting at the View in the back room, in Highland Room. We will discuss the next steps of communication between the board and committee chairs and the future years together. So if you put that on your calendar, you'll be getting an email from Sarah soon on that matter. We have our next professional development series event, Power of Lifestyle is Your Best Medicine with Cocky Donahue, will be held at 11 a.m. before the Thursday, January 30th meeting, so next Thursday. Your lifestyle choices have profound effects on your health, wellness, performance, energy levels, and even how you age. In this presentation, we will talk about the growing prevalence of chronic disease in adults in the U.S., such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, etc. You will learn that you can take control of your health and make considerable improvements. You are not at the mercy of your genes. You have enormous power to make positive changes at any age. Register by today in DAC TV. We also have an upcoming event, Saturday, February 1st from 9 a.m. to 11:30. We are looking for volunteers to help build small dining tables, coffee tables, and end tables for melamine and particle board at New Life Furniture. No woodworking experience is needed to participate. Contact Rotarian Brian Bowling or Michelle Starr to volunteer. Nominations are open for the 2025 Jefferson Awards. Please find the nomination form on the front page of our website or in this week's E-Raise. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to my esteemed Rotarian, Al Conscious, to kick off today's program.
Thank you, President Eric. I'm very pleased to welcome longtime friend Rob Portman. Senator Portman's career in public service has spanned 3 decades, included service in 3 presidential administrations, as well as 2 terms in the U.S. Senate and 6 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives. In the George W. Bush administration, he served in 2 cabinet-level jobs as Director of Office and Management and Budget, as well as United States Trade Representative. Under George H.W. Bush, he served as Associate Counsel to the President and was Director of the White House Office of Legislative Affairs. Rob is known for his civility, successful bipartisan policymaking, work ethic, and a grasp of a broad range of complex issues. Over 220 of his bills were signed into law by Presidents Biden, Trump, and Obama during his tenure in the Senate. He served as the lead Republican negotiator on the bipartisan infrastructure law that is making historic improvements to our nation's roads, ports, rails, bridges, broadband, and more. He played a key role in U.S. foreign policy through his seat on the Foreign Relations Committee and as co-chair and founder of the Senate Ukraine Caucus. He made 10 trips to Ukraine since the Revolution of Dignity in 2014 and is a key advocate for congressional support of Ukraine. He currently serves as founder of the Portman Center for Policy Solutions at the University of Cincinnati and is a distinguished visiting fellow in the practice of public policy at the American Enterprise Institute. Rob was born and raised in Cincinnati, where he lives today with his wife Jane, who's here with us today. Together, they have 3 adult children, Jed, Will, and Sally. Please welcome Senator Rob Portman.
Al has consigned me to the left side of the podium, not sure why.
It's the most visible side. Okay, we thought it might be interesting if we threw out a few questions to Senator Portman and have him answer, and then we'll do a Q&A afterwards, leaving about 10 minutes. And also, some people have already sent in questions, so we'll try to include those in the presentation also. Senator Portman is returning Just recently, I understand, from Washington with all the inauguration festivities. So let's begin the questioning by first, how was Washington? What did you do there? And how do you rank the initial stages of the new administration?
Great. Thanks, Al. It's great to be back at Rotary. And I miss the hall of mirrors. This is fantastic. You know, we get our own view here, not just seeing ourselves. And to Rotary, thank you for what you do in our community. You are individually community leaders, each of you, and Al is involved in everything. He's been involved with Stepping Stones for kids with disabilities. He's been involved with Ronald McDonald House, which is a very important cause to my wife Jane, who is chair of Children's Hospital and still very active there. This is for parents who come in from all over the world and need a place to stay while the kids are getting the best care in the United States. #1 pediatric hospital in America, Children's Hospital. And he's involved with our tennis tournament and, of course, volunteer activities through the Rotary. The Rotary itself, you all do a great job helping kids with disabilities through St. Rita's, the work you do with the Cincinnati Parks. So many causes internationally that you contribute to. The eradication of polio is one of the incredible stories that Rotary was behind. It's not quite there yet, but my dad was a victim of polio. Probably some of your parents or grandparents were. He was here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he was lucky. You know, he made it through. But just think about that. We don't even worry about it anymore, thanks to the good work that the Rotary has done around the world. So we can make a difference, and that's a great example of it. Yes, I was, and by the way, Angie, thank you for those nice words, and thanks for what you do in the area of drug prevention every day. You know, this issue of the opioid crisis, and before it, crack cocaine and so on. I mean, it's a plague in our communities, and one great way to deal with it, in addition to treatment and recovery and so on, is just through prevention. It's the most effective way to keep people out of the funnel of addiction in the first place, and Angie's on the front lines. And I'm honored still to be involved in some of those issues, and you know, I think it's something that can be totally nonpartisan. Everybody ought to be for, and we can make a difference here if we do the right thing. Thanks, Eric, for your presidency and your comments today, and love the invocation. How was Washington? It was cold. So cold. How cold was it? So cold that inauguration had to be inside the Capitol. I asked some of the folks who made that decision why they made it, and they said, you know, the Secret Service came to it and said, realize, you know, even though it's going to be 20 degrees probably, there'll be snow on the ground, and with the wind chill, you know, people sitting out there, standing out there for hours and hours, it's just not safe. So anyway, that was too bad, but it was really a beautiful day, it turned out, and you know, the sun was shining, and there's a spirit of optimism in the town, not by everybody. There were, of course, demonstrations on both sides, but there's a sense of, you know, something new and fresh. And my own view, for what it's worth, having been in public service for 30 years, is that we still have big challenges in terms of just getting both sides to agree on things so that we can make a difference in terms of policy. That's why we founded the Portman Center here in Cincinnati. Our executive director is here, so we're very pleased to have a superstar, a professor here in Cincinnati who runs the Portman Center, Andy Lewis. Andy, stand up. We can all see you. And Serene and Luke, you guys stand up too. These are a couple of our Portman fellows. We have 17 fellows. So anyway, our goal is to do kind of what the invocation said, is to figure out how do we find common ground again to solve policy problems. Bipartisanship and civility are good things, but frankly, our concern is more about policy. Like, you know, even if you have good civil conversations and you still can't figure out a way to find common ground and solve issues like immigration and the border, which haven't been solved for over 30 years now, we've talked about it a lot. We're at debt and deficit, which is now approaching $37 trillion. Just unprecedented in terms of its scope and impact on all of us eventually. but also issues like healthcare and education, and so many issues that we should be able to tackle as a country. And the partisanship is pushing us, unfortunately, in my view, further apart and not towards solutions. And this club has always been about solutions. I love coming here because we talk about policy, and you've had the state of the city addresses by the mayors and so on, and every day in your lives, in your business lives, and some of you are doctors, some of you are teachers, some of you are engineers, whatever it is, you've got to figure out how to get to yes, right? Figure out how to make concessions in order to move forward. In our families, we do the same thing. But in politics, we're falling behind. So anyway, that's sort of the purpose of the Portman Center. And we have seminars and we have symposia, one coming up on affordable housing, how can we find common ground on increasing our housing stock in this country, which is a huge problem. But we also have some students at a very local level here, 17 fellows who are kind of ambassadors out there. They're being imbued with the spirit of, whether you come from the right or come from the left, you got to figure out how to find common ground. And they're also working with other students. And we've had a lot of work at UC or Cincinnati recently that Andy has actually been co-leading on civility. How do we get students to talk to each other and not to disrespect each other, but instead to listen to other points of view. And then at the national level, we're working on some issues, including primaries. And we just got a nice grant to do that from an academic perspective. But if we don't figure out our primary system better, I'm afraid it's going to be tough to solve that bigger problem, because increasingly the primaries determine who gets elected in a red state or a blue state or a red district or a blue district, and our districts are more and more like that, and our states are more and more like that. Remember, there were only 7 swing states this last time around, and pretty much every other state was considered to be red or blue. And so a lot of focus on the primary, and people aren't voting in primaries in big numbers. Instead, a very small group of people are. And that group of people tends to determine who gets elected. And then those who get elected tend to want to be focused on that small group. There's a data point out there that I think is accurate from one of the groups that does this nationally, saying that 8% of the American voters are now electing 80% of the members of Congress. And you kind of do the math and think about it. I mean, this is a very active group. This is a group that's very involved in our community. But if I were to ask for a show of hands, which I won't because I don't want to embarrass anybody, let's do it. What the hell? Okay. How many of you vote in primaries consistently? Okay. Well, you're unusual. More ways than one. This is the entire 8%. So, unfortunately, even in a Republican primary in Ohio, as we just had one recently for the Senate race, for the successor, actually for the Sherrod Brown seat, and before that it was the successor for the seat that I was honored to hold. Less than half of Republicans showed up at the primaries. And there's only, the biggest group in Ohio now is independent voters. Republicans are not the biggest group, or Democrats aren't the biggest group. So you get a small group of that party voting. And I think one reason that happens in states like Ohio is Republicans don't really want to show up to vote in the Democratic primary, or vice versa, because by doing so you become that party. It's not really an open primary. So if you want to vote as a Republican in a Democratic primary because you think somebody's doing a good job here locally, you become a Democrat. And people aren't interested in that. In other states, you're not allowed to vote in a primary unless you are of that political party. And so where independent voters are now the plurality in most of our states and around the country, they can't vote in these primaries. So I do think we need to figure out how to open up this primary system or get more people voting, get people focused on that. So you'll end up with candidates who better represent the district or the state. So that's one of the many things one can do. I mean, I do think there's a lot of other issues too, like how media covers everything now. It's got to be controversial. If you do something good and bipartisan, they really don't care about it. That's harsh, but it's true, largely, at least in the national media. And then how we fundraise. Increasingly, fundraising is done online. Although some of you probably still get some solicitations from your friends in office. Mostly it's online, and it's very partisan. I don't know if you picked up on some of these emails. I get a bunch of them. And when I wanted to run again, my consultants came to me and said, if you're going to run again, you got to change your whole email strategy. You're talking about policy. Nobody cares. You got to talk about how bad the other side is and how they're going to ruin the country. That's how you raise the money. And in Ohio, this most recent Senate race, it was the most money spent in any Senate race in history, in not just Ohio, but the country. They're second. It was about $500 million was spent. And that money came mostly from outside Ohio. And mostly it was 30, 40, 50, $60 contributions, small contributions, but adding up. So Sherry Brown was spending a lot of time raising money in California and New York, online. And Bernie Moreno was spending a lot of money raising money, and a lot of time raising money in, say, Texas and, I don't know, Ohio, maybe, but Georgia, other states where there's no Republicans. And that's I think tends to push people out to the extremes more, because you're raising money based on some pretty harsh messaging, and you get there and you're sort of, well, this is what I committed to. And this guy who I was calling, the devil, is now the leader of the other party, and how am I going to work with him or her? So anyway, there's a lot of issues out there we need to work on, I think, as a country in order to bring us back together. Al, I got a little off your question, sorry about that, but Washington was gold.
Well, picking up on your comments about the Portman Center, I understand that you identify the problems, you have the symposiums. What happens after that? How do you actually affect change?
Andy? Luke? Serene? So, it's tough, and it's a big problem, and it's hard to move the needle, right? So we're doing it in three ways. One is, at a micro level, these students are just fantastic, and we've been able, I think, at University of Cincinnati, as you've seen, avoid some of the worst of these issues, in the demonstrations in other colleges like Columbia and so on, where, they basically shut down the university and don't listen to any other point of view. And my own view is that some of this is outside agitators coming in and doing it. But you see, we avoided that, partly because of the work that Andy has done at the Portman Center and others, to try to say, hey, let's, if you're pro-Hamas or you're pro-Israel, let's talk about it. Let's not just, throw rocks at each other and curse words and shut down buildings and so on. That's one. And these guys are ambassadors. The two students you see here today have taken on this issue. One, by the way, is going to be a medical doctor. One is going to be a lawyer, probably. Luke, you heading toward law? Yeah. He's a lawyer already, right? And then second, we're doing these, again, we brought Joe Manchin in, and Kirsten Sinema, and Heidi Heitkamp, and others who brought in the state reps, and we've gone down to city council. We've got one coming up with 2 members of Congress. Greg Landsman from here represents this district where we are right now, and then Mike Carey from Columbus, Democrat, Republican. What we do is we invite the media in, and we invite people in and talk about it, how can you come to that common ground, how can you figure out problems, and both of these members of Congress are interested in that. And it's been fun. Joe Manchin unplugged, because he wasn't running for office again, so he had some choice words to say about Washington. But that's it in terms of kind of trying to show that you can find common ground. Brent Spence Bridge is a great example of this. For 30 years, I talked about it, as did every elected official. We had press conferences there with President Obama, President, Reagan probably, President Bush, and we're going to fix this bridge. And nobody could ever figure out how to do it. And so in the bipartisan infrastructure bill with Kirsten Sinema and I were the 2 co-authors of that. She's a Democrat, I was a Republican. And we finally said, these big bridge projects around the country that affect commerce. Remember, about 3% of America's commerce goes over this bridge, every day. I mean, this is huge, I-75 and 71 coming together. And think of the impact it has on our community. It's even a global impact, really. And so we provided some way to get that funding with a local match and so on. And that's the funding that we now have for the bridge here. So, a few $1 billion headed our way to finally fix that bridge. And again, it hadn't happened in 30 years. So Sinema and I got together here in Cincinnati and talked about it. How did that happen? We built it from the inside out. We didn't rely on leadership, didn't rely on the White House. We relied on members of Congress coming together, 2 and 2 and 5 and 5 and 10 and 10 and 20 and 20, and kept it totally bipartisan. Not everybody supported it at the end. That's okay. We got 69 votes out of 100 in the Senate, which is pretty good. But the point is, it's going to actually help get something done in our community, the communities around the country, like the broadband you talked about. So that's second. And then third is we are looking at these national issues like redistricting and how you deal with primaries and trying to get experts in. We don't want to take partisan positions, but we do want to have the best experts provide information. Our students are helping with all these things with the symposium on affordable housing. They'll come up with a report about, what did we learn that we can find common ground and try to get that into Washington. So, look, it's a hard thing to change, and ultimately it's about everybody in this room and all the, the voters in our great country to say, we want to elect people who want to get stuff done for us, get stuff done for our families. In the spring, we're going to hold up 2 members of Congress, one Democrat, one Republican, as great examples of this, because that's one thing we can do, I think, as a country, is to hold people up who are doing the right thing. Not just reward those who are on MSNBC or on Fox News or on the online, yelling and screaming, but hold up those who maybe you don't hear about that much, but who are actually quietly getting stuff done that helps our country. And we aren't going to announce this yet, who it's going to be, but the initials are Ben Cardin and Shelley Moore-Capito. And the reason we picked them is, they're both well versed in their own party. So Shelley's in West Virginia, some of you know her. She's got probably the most Republican state in the country now. I think Donald Trump won it by like 120 points or something. I think he really did win it by like 43 points. So she's in a red state, she's a conservative, she's proud of that. Cardin represents Maryland. Well, Maryland, it's as blue as that ticket you won. It's hardcore blue, and his successor, he's just nuts. He's not going to run again, but his successor is very, very progressive, and he's a good Democrat. He's proud of it. But both of them have figured out that their job is to find common ground and get things done, and so they both have great records of bipartisanship, and that's what we want to see. We're not talking about everybody being moderate. We're talking about people holding their views, having a principled view, but understanding that at the end of the day, you've got to get to yes. And so we're going to hold them up. Sorry, Andy. Andy's like, you were supposed to talk about that. But we're going to do that every year, and give them a little honorarium and have them give a talk. So Al, it's going to be tough to move the needle. We get that, but we're going to do our part, and I think everybody can do their part.
Thank you. And good luck in your studies, guys. In the interest of time, we won't do any lawyer jokes. Okay? Rob and I were chatting earlier about the Davos Economic Forum that's taking place now. I'm always fascinated by that event. If you watch some of the interviews that come out of there, you get some of the top CEOs in the world, actually, as well as world leaders and so on. And the overwhelming thing that came through this year, at least from the ones I've seen so far, is the emphasis on AI, artificial intelligence, and the estimates are that almost 100% of the CEOs that are there are going very heavily into AR. I'm interested in getting your viewpoint on where is all this taking us?
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard that the AI is the top issue there, except for one. Donald Trump. The whole world's talking about it, and he's going to be by virtual means, I assume, on a big screen, talking to the conference today, actually. And he was there when he was in office. He used to go to Davos, and there are a lot of people there don't agree with him, but there are a lot of foreign leaders there and CEOs and so on. I was there last year. It's an interesting group because you've got people from all over the world, talking about these issues in a rare forum. AI is already making a difference, in my view, in terms of our productivity numbers. You've probably seen the economy is doing pretty well right now. Inflation is still an issue. We still have affordability issues. I mentioned affordable housing being one of them. But our productivity is a little higher. And what the economists will tell you, and there's some economists in this room who I hope will agree, is productivity is probably the single most important thing. So if you have everything else going pretty well, the labor market's not too tight, inflation is under control, interest rates are under control. The question is, how much can one worker produce? And we have a problem in this country right now in that our workforce is not expanding. So the countries that are bringing more people in or having more children tend to do better economically. But another way to do better economically is that people you do have working, each one can do more, be more productive and more think AI is already beginning to work, because you look at our productivity numbers, finally they're starting to tick up a little bit. But there's so much potential to do more. So there's good parts and bad parts about it, and at Davos they're going to talk about both, I'm sure. The good part about it is that all of our lives can be improved from, we were talking about Children's Hospital earlier, from finding the cures to diseases just through quantum computing and putting all this information, all this data. Cleveland Clinic is doing this big time right now with IBM. I'm sure, I know St. Children's is as well. And, you know, there's some financial folks here, Mike Eric and Mike Al, who will tell you in the financial services industry, you know, you can get an answer like that now. And not that all these algorithms are smart, you know, someone's got to write the algorithm, right? But if you have an algorithm that's good, you can come up with the answers quickly and be more efficient. So that's the good part. The bad part is it can control our lives, you know. You got to be sure that I mean, my view is when I pick up the phone and have a question for a service entity, I want to talk to somebody. And increasingly I'm talking to an AI bot who tells me, you know, please repeat yourself. I didn't hear you. That's not it's because you're not human. And, you know, there's a danger that if the bad guys get AI before we do, that they'll use AI almost in a military manner. So China in particular is collecting data all over the world. They're intensely interested in data. Why? Because apparently you have more and more reams of data you have, the more effectively you can use AI, let's say to shut down our grid here in Cincinnati. Or let's say to have all the lights, you know, turn green rather than red and cause accidents. I mean, you can see if you are trying to hurt people, what you can do with AI. It's pretty scary. So I think these leaders are also talking about, you know, what kind of parameters can we put on it. There was an effort made over the last, I don't know, 18 months in Congress to come together with some ideas on how to regulate AI and technology more broadly, but AI in particular, because of some of these concerns, privacy concerns, again, military, technological malfeasance, those sorts of things. And they had something like 12 seminars. I don't know, maybe you know many. I spoke at one of them because I've been involved a little bit in this issue, and I've written an op-ed about it. And because I did some legislating in this when I was in Congress, just trying to get the federal government and the military up to speed on AI, because you get the private sector going like this, and government's kind of down here. And after 12 seminars and a lot of work, they really didn't come up with anything. Why? Because everybody agreed it was a problem, everybody agreed there needs to be regulation, but did I talk about common ground earlier? Couldn't find common ground on what the solutions are. So Congress is, you know, behind the curve already on this, and yet from a political point of view, they can't seem to get their act together to come up with what the rules ought to be. So I think one positive of having these tech titans close to the Trump administration, not that they're all Republicans, by the way, they're not, but they all showed up at the inauguration and sat with the cabinet, is that maybe we can sort of force them to knock their heads together and to knock heads together and come up with some guardrails on this, because I do think that needs to happen. I'm not a big regulatory guy, but on the other hand, if you don't have any regulations, you have the Wild West, you could have some real problems, and none of us want to see that. So my hope is that they'll be able to figure out something. One thing Sam Altman said last week, you may have seen this, he's the open AI genius. I've met him, he's about 13 years old. He looks like he's about 13 years old. Yeah, but he may be 35. I mean, he's like brilliant. He kind of chat GPT and all that. He kind of came up with a lot of other stuff. These two know much more about this stuff than I do, by the way, because they're also young. But he said the government needs to rely more on the private sector, because the private sector is where these advances are being made, not in government. And he's right. So how do you get the private sector engaged and involved in this? Not have them, you know, just trying to feather their own nest, but what's in the best interest of the country.
You're very knowledgeable in a lot of areas. Following up on what we just talked about in AI, it seems like the AI is going to require huge data centers. Actually the production, the generation of the electricity, or whatever power we use, doesn't seem to be nearly as big a problem as the transmission. So the people that have been speaking at Davos, they're trying to find ways of positioning either the data centers near the transmission or bringing the transmission to the data centers. Do you have any comment on that just seems like a very large problem? One of the statistics that somebody threw out, he said if you take all our transmission lines and put them back to back, they would run like from Northern California to Southern California. But what we need is the transmission lines that were the equivalent of running from the United States to the moon. So that's quite a differential.
No, it is. Both are big issues. I would say that the production of power is also a big issue, though. And even here in Ohio, we're now a net importer of energy. Only a few years ago, we were a net exporter of energy, in part because of the big coal-fired plants along the Ohio River. You know, we were very efficient. They were also dirty, and so they were shut down. But nothing's come to replace them. And there are natural gas power stations now in Ohio that didn't used to be here, and they're out competing the coal, by the way. So even if coal wasn't dirty, it wouldn't survive. For those of you who are pro-coal, it's not really about, in my view, the emissions. It's more about the economy. And these natural gas pipelines we have in Ohio now that are the infrastructure to take our own gas from Marcellus, as an example, which is a huge shale find here in Ohio. Is really exciting, and I think that's, you know, the emissions are about half what coal is, maybe less, but as importantly, you know, it's creating jobs in Ohio and it's good. But we don't have enough generation, and we have an estimate that we'll need 40% more power for electricity in the next 10 years than we have now. And there's just not enough plans on the books to do that. Some say in Ohio it's more like 100% increase over the next year, or 10 years, 100% in the next 10 yees. Why? Because of what I was talking about, which is Ohio is becoming a magnet for some of these technology companies. They're putting data centers in place, but also things like electric battery companies. As you know, Honda has one, GM has one with LG. There are some really exciting technologies going on in Ohio. The technological advancements leading to great advanced manufacturing, but they use a heck of a lot of power. The Intel plant in Columbus, now Intel's kind of on shaky ground right now, but that plant is moving ahead. It's being built by Bechtel. I'm on their board to be fair. So I'm very excited about that and involved in that. But that takes a heck of a lot of power, you know, to make a semiconductor. So where are we going to get this power? And then Al's raising the second point is, if you have the power, how are you going to move it to move it efficiently? Because our transmission lines are both inadequate by volume, but also by quality. We need to improve our transmission lines. Some of you are probably in this business. Maybe somebody from the utility side can correct me, but I think the only way out of this is nuclear. And we're going to have to get to nuclear power. And we have a couple plants in Ohio that are operating fine. They're up north, they're on the lake. But we really don't have much here in Ohio. And there's now an effort to use these smaller modular nuclear plants. Just yesterday, the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority, applied along with a consortium of companies to build a bunch of modular plants. Now, they've got a lot of hydropower down there, which is great, but places like here, we have a little hydropower actually on the Ohio River. There's some small hydro plants. But that's not nearly enough. We really got to go, in my view, to nuclear at some point. And it's going to take a while, because to site these plants takes about 5 years, which is too long. And that's one thing I hope the Trump administration will do as part of DOGE, or whatever it's called. DOGE is that, and that's to get permitting moving much more quickly. And it should be safe, but it also should be, you should go to green light something, you know, in a year, not in 5 years. And we got to get them going. There's the last nuclear power plant that was built was over 30 years ago, until about 6 months ago. And you had one in Georgia, two actually two power plants side by side down in Georgia, Georgia Power. And it took too long and it was too expensive. Bechtel was also involved in that, so I toured those facilities. It's called the Vogel plant. But those two reactors were the first ones in over 30 years to build this country. So we got to get on the stick, and these smaller ones can be done more quickly, more efficiently. There's also one being built in Wyoming, which is the Bill Gates technology, as people call it, which is pretty exciting because it's much safer. They use salt rather than water in order to avoid any potential problems, and as a cooling agent. And apparently this is a very efficient plant with relatively highly enriched uranium, and so there are some exciting things going on. And then fusion, of course, is the ultimate here. You got to move to fusion, and there is some Livermore Labs doing some good work there. They finally were able to show that fusion can produce net energy. In other words, fusion has been this dream. Instead of fission, where you create all this waste, fusion you have no waste. And so you take away the biggest problem with nuclear. But we've always, when we've tried to do it, we put more energy into it to create the power than we get out of it. Now we can get net power out of it. So hopefully the next few years we'll see, after 50 years everybody's saying, this is going to happen in 20 years, it's going to happen in 20 years, it's going to happen in 20 years. Finally we should be able to say we can get this fusion going. And so hopefully 10 years from now, whoever sitting in the seat will be saying, we got the power, it's fusion, it's safe, and we've got the data centers here in Ohio, we've got the technology, jobs, and everything's moving in the right direction. But right now, we're in trouble, both on the power generation and on the transmission.
Well, I have many more insightful questions for you, but I will read one that was sent in to us by one of the members, and then we'll move on to Q&A. So Eric, if you want to grab a microphone here. Thanks. So his question, a little slanted, says the polarization in U.S. politics has led to more extreme candidates emerging on both sides, even though the majority of Americans identify as centrists. What steps can we take to break out of this cycle and encourage a political environment that better represents the nation's core values?
Well, I won't repeat myself because I think we've already addressed that issue, really. And I do think the forces right now are pushing people to the outside. We talked about fundraising, how it's done now. We talked about primaries, how they operate. We talked about redistricting a little bit, although that's another topic. Redistricting, I'm not saying it's not an issue. I think it is. People draw lines so that they create just a very red or very blue district. And sometimes they don't follow political jurisdictions. But I think it's less of a problem than it used to be. Why? Because people are choosing and voting with their feet geographically where they're going to live. So you could redraw the district lines, in Ohio, which people always want to do. But the reality is most people that live in urban areas like this are Democrats. There's not a single Republican council member or mayor in the 9 biggest cities in Ohio. Not one. And yet we're a more red state. But if you go to the countryside, just beyond that hill there, in Kentucky, or I guess anywhere in Kentucky pretty much, but or in this way, east, west, north, in the rural areas, it's heavy red territory. The suburbs are still somewhat a battlefield, but Hamilton County, which is mostly a suburban county now, or Franklin County and Columbus are now solid blue. I don't know how many Republicans we have left countywide. It used to be all Republican. So I'm not saying that redistricting isn't important, but I think it is interesting to note that geography determines a lot of this politics already now. They say education level also is an indicator. People who have more degrees tend to be more Democratic and less more Republican. But I do think the most important thing is to have us, all of us, speak up and to let people know we expect you to work for us. We expect you to get things done. And not just throw out the red meat on the left or on the right. And again, I don't think you have to be a moderate to do that. I think you can be pretty conservative or pretty liberal, but you recognize that when you get elected to represent the people, it's not just that small narrow group that votes in a primary. It's your entire district, your entire state, or in the case of the presidency, the entire country.
Thank you.
Go to the
Anybody who has questions, please raise your hand. Eric will come around with his microphone.
Senator Portman, thank you for your bipartisan work. I'm very curious that you see primaries as the problem rather than gerrymandering. And I say this as somebody who volunteered most of last year trying to collect petition signatures to create a redistricting process in Ohio that would be insulated from conflicts of interest. Because whatever party holds the control in a state has a built-in incentive to draw districts to preserve that power. And that campaign failed for a number of reasons, which included distorted ballot language. But citizens worked really hard on that to try and set some guardrails. And to me, being primary is a symptom of the illness, which is the conflict of interest in how we draw our districts. So when you talk about the Wild West and kind of what will restrain conflicts of interest, I'm wondering what you see as a way forward on that.
Yeah, I mean, my views have kind of evolved on this. As I said, redistricting is an issue, but it's frankly not the biggest issue in my view. And a lot of it's because, again, people have chosen where they're going to live. So unless you do redistricting in a way that ignores political boundaries, in other words, if you don't have Cincinnati staying together, but you instead split up Cincinnati, you're going to end up with a Democrat in Cincinnati. In the second district that I used to represent, you're going to have a Republican, because that district is solid Republican now. Because people have chosen, they want to, live in these more rural or suburban rural areas. And so my point was geography tends to determine more and more what people's political persuasion is, or at least the consequences of people moving to certain areas. And so it's tough to draw those lines. I wasn't wild about issue one. I didn't speak up, one way or another much about it because that wasn't my view, it wasn't my role, I thought. But I didn't vote for it, and I didn't think it was well drafted because I think there needs to be some accountability in it. And when you have, as I recall, judges who are appointed by judges without a political connection, any accountability, I think that's a mistake. I think people should be held to account. And I think that's, that makes it worse, not better in terms of redistricting. You can now hold your state rep to account, and you should. And you have strong views on it, and that's great. And it sounds like you express them, and that's appropriate. And so organizing is good. Second, I do think it's a mistake to split up political jurisdictions. And sometimes you have to, certain numbers just don't work out, so you have to take half of a county or a quarter of a county and put it in a district. But when I represented the second district, I just really didn't like it when the state legislature would come in and divide up my counties that I represented. Because people identify themselves through those counties. Now I think there are 23 counties in the second district of Ohio. And I remember when they split Scioto County to try to make the numbers work. Ted Strickland and I both represented it. He was not very happy about it because he was born and raised there. But people were confused. People had no idea who the member of Congress was. And it was harder for them to petition us. And so I like the idea of having one of the principles of redistricting being respecting political boundaries as much as you can. And that proposal didn't do that. Now it could have, and that, I'm not saying that was a necessary part of it, but it did. And I think that was one of the issues that a lot of people had as they looked at it.
Thank you, Senator. You talked earlier about the deficit, and I think that's a big issue. As we go forward, how do we resolve this issue when you figure, number one, we've got a tremendous amount of interest owed on the debt. Why we didn't go to a 100-year debt like every corporation did, instead we're stuck in this now 4 and 5% rates. And secondly, the third rail of Social Security and Medicare that nobody wants to touch. So how do we ever get this budget deficit under control?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think you're right on these long-term bonds. We should have taken advantage of those really low rates we had. And honestly, I think because rates were low short term, people thought, well, this is going to continue forever. That's what they always think. And for the financial experts in the room like Al, it goes up and down. He's a bond vigilante. But I think the only way to do it in the current context, and I say this sadly, is to take it out of Congress and set up one of these independent commissions and have members of Congress on it, bipartisan, and then you take it back to Congress for an up or down vote. And it's going to be years now before we can get back on an even keel, but you have to start. And I say it's going to take years because nobody wants to touch Social Security or Medicare in particular for people who are retired or near retirement. So you have to start with younger people. And I would imagine that Serene, I haven't talked to you about this, probably doesn't think that her Social Security check is going to be there. You what? Yeah, so she thinks it's going to be in the negative, you know, she'll have to be paying it, so she'll get anything out of it. So for young people, I think you can make the changes now, and they won't object too much politically because they don't think it's going to be there anyway. They're smart enough to figure out the numbers don't work. But that's going to take, 20, 30, 40 years to start to right the ship, but you got to start. And I was involved in a number of commissions over my time, and I always felt that they were a pretty effective way to get outside of the politics a little bit and come up with answers. Simpson-Bowles didn't work, which, remember this, Simpson, Al Simpson, and Bowles first name, Erskine-Bowles, Democrat, Republican, set up this commission to look at the budget deficit and debt and how to come up with answers on it. And they got a bipartisan majority, but it was never statutory. Congress never passed that law. It was an administration, the executive branch, the Obama administration put that in place. So when their recommendations came to Congress, there was no responsibility on Congress's part to take it up, and they never did. I also will say that the fact that President Obama opposed the recommendations really hurt it. It was his commission. He opposed it. And I think in retrospect, he probably regrets that. But even if he had supported it, it still didn't have the requirement that you go to Congress for an up or down vote. And, I didn't agree with everything in that commission, but I thought it was generally in the right direction. And it did take on the mandatory spending. For those of you who follow this issue closely, you know that this is not about the kind of spending that we hear debated, which is the agencies and departments, all the stuff that DOJ is going after, and I hope they find a lot of efficiencies. That's great. There's plenty to be found. But still, that's only about 14% of the budget. The rest of the budget is either defense, which most of us think ought to be increased, or it's what's on autopilot, which is about 70% of the budget now, which is interest on the debt you mentioned, which is now higher annually than our entire defense budget. So we're paying money out of our pockets to pay interest on the debt. And, we're paying more for that than we're paying for our national defense. And so the rest of it is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and a couple other entitlements, but those are the big ones. They're now 70% of the budget and growing faster than the 14%. And so that's the problem. You've got to take on the big stuff. And to take on the big stuff, I think it was Jesse James, and that's why he robbed banks. He said that's where the money is. You have to take on the politics. And the politics are tough. You're grabbing that third rail of the New York subway system, as they said. And it's third rail. But that's why taking it outside and having a commission, I think it makes sense. I've testified on this. I've written op-eds on it. I've been pushing my Republican colleagues to take it up, and my Democratic colleagues say, hey, you should care about this. Social Security benefits are going to be cut 24% in 2034. That's right in the corner. Unless we do something, you want benefits to be cut. All right, this is a wrap.
This is a wrap. Let's thank Senator Portman. In your honor, we are making a donation in your honor to the End Polio No campaign, which is, as you know, we're so close to doing that. We also want to give you a token of appreciation, the beautiful skyline on the one side and our four-way test on the other side, which is a mission of what we do. Thanks again. I know you have a 2 o'clock, but you'll be meandering your way, but you may be asked peppered with questions, but I want to send you on your way, and thanks so much for being here. Thank you. So am I reminder, the World Affairs Committee is meeting in the Highland Room, and sign up for the Chef Salazar by Friday at 5 p.m. Meeting adjourned.